Hope you all had a great holiday. Rachel's got the night off, but she will be back here tomorrow night. In the meantime, we've got a lot to get to tonight. While you were polishing off that second helping of turkey, the breaking news has been piling up faster than Thanksgiving leftovers, thanks in large part to special counsel Robert Mueller. Shortly before we took the air tonight, the famously radio silent Mueller team dropped a bombshell about the president's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. I'll have more on that in just a moment. We're also following another breaking headline, this one out of Mississippi. President Trump is on the ground there now. He's about to hold his second rally today for Republican Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, who faces off against Democrat Mike Espy in a runoff election tomorrow. A runoff that has at times felt like an out-of-body experience in terms of how many times it made you shake your head and say, did that really happen? Whether it was the Republican candidate saying that she'd be in the front row of a public hanging, or the Republican candidate's robotic, almost comical non-apology for those offensive remarks, or her debate performance in which she seemed to say her greatest selling point is Donald Trump. As if all of that weren't surreal enough, today on the eve of the runoff, there was this, nooses seen hanging on trees outside the Mississippi State Capitol. This runoff is shaping up to be an MRI of the soul of Mississippi. The next 24 hours are critical, and I'll have a lot more on that in just a moment. But first, to that breaking news from special counsel Robert Mueller and the president's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. The first Trump campaign official to reach a plea deal with Robert Mueller was his foreign policy advisor, George Papadopoulos, this guy on the right. His plea deal was announced in October of 2017, on the very same day that Mueller charged Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, on the left, and deputy campaign chairman Rick Gates with multiple tax and money laundering charges. Today, Papadopoulos turned himself into a minimum security camp adjacent to the federal prison in Oxford, Wisconsin, to begin serving a 14-day sentence for lying to the FBI about his Russia-linked contacts. Papadopoulos received that relatively light sentence from the judge in his case after Mueller's prosecutors this summer filed what is known as a pre-sentencing memorandum, essentially their recommendation about how much jail time he should receive based on the gravity of his crime and the usefulness of his cooperation. Now, in that sentencing memo to the judge, Mueller's prosecutors recommended jail time for the advisor was appropriate and warranted. Quote, his lies negatively affected the FBI's Russia investigation and prevented the FBI from effectively identifying and confronting witnesses in a timely fashion. The defendant's false statements were intended to harm the investigation and did so. Now, when it came time to describe the extent of Papadopoulos' cooperation, the special counsel told the judge that the defendant did not provide substantial assistance, saying that much of the information he provided came only after the government confronted him with his own emails, text messages, internet search history, and other information it had obtained via search warrant and subpoenas. And while Papadopoulos checking into federal prison today for a 2-week stay signals that his role in the Russia investigation is likely at an end, tonight we learned game-changing new details about the cooperation of his boss during the 2016 campaign, Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Remember, Manafort was convicted by a Virginia jury this summer on 8 counts of tax and bank fraud. But before that trial even started, the former Trump campaign chairman was already in jail. That was just before his trial was due to start in Virginia. Mueller filed new charges against Manafort in D.C., accusing both he and his longtime associate, Konstantin Klimenik, who the special counsel alleged to have had ties to Russian intelligence, with witness tampering related to their Ukraine lobbying campaign. Now, as a result, the judge ordered Manafort jailed pending his trial. As the judge told the court at the time, quote, this is not the first time we've had to talk about him skating too close to the line. She went on, "I am concerned you seem to treat these proceedings as just another marketing exercise. You have abused the trust the court placed in you 6 months ago." So that was in June. Manafort jailed on new charges of witness tampering before he had even gone to trial. After being convicted at trial in Virginia in August and saying he would not cooperate with the special counsel, Manafort surprised many by striking a plea deal before his second trial in D.C. was due to begin on money laundering charges, as well as those recently filed witness tampering charges. As part of that plea in September, Manafort agreed to answer, quote, "fully, truthfully, completely, and forthrightly questions about any and all matters the government wanted to ask." Well, now it appears that Manafort may not have done that. And perhaps in retrospect, we should have seen this coming. Earlier this month, we got this report from ABC News detailing rising tension between Mueller's team and Manafort over his level of cooperation. As ABC reported at the time, Mueller's team is, quote, "not getting what they want," said one source with knowledge of the discussions. Quote, sources told ABC News there's frustration over whether Manafort is fully providing the information he agreed to offer, putting a strain on the deal. That was a single report on November 9th. Then 10 days ago, we were expecting to see Mueller's team file a pre-sentencing memo spelling out details surrounding Manafort's cooperation, when both sides pushed it back, insisting on a rare 10-day delay so that Mueller could prepare, quote, "a report that will be of greater assistance in the court's management of this matter." The reason for that delay was unclear. There was a lot of speculation that something might be about to happen in the Mueller investigation that Manafort might potentially be helping with. Well, tonight we have our answer. In a new filing this evening, Mueller's prosecutors spell out the issue directly, saying that Manafort has breached the cooperation agreement that he signed with Mueller's prosecutors in September by repeatedly lying to federal investigators. From tonight's filing, quote, "after signing the plea agreement, Manafort committed federal crimes by lying to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the special counsel's office on a variety of subject matters." Mueller's team do not spell out in detail exactly what Manafort lied about, but note that they will at some point file a detailed sentencing submission to the probation department and the court, setting forth the nature of the defendant's crimes and lies. Setting forth the nature of the defendant's lies and crimes. Quote, "as the defendant has breached the plea agreement, there is no reason to delay his sentencing herein." Now, the filing tonight is a joint status report filed by both the special counsel and Manafort's attorneys. As such, it also lays out Paul Manafort's side of the story, wherein he denies the latest allegations against him. Quote, "after signing the plea agreement, Manafort met with the government on numerous occasions and answered the government's questions. Manafort has provided information to the government in an effort to live up to his cooperation obligations." It goes on. "He believes he has provided truthful information and does not agree with the government's characterization or that he has breached the agreement. Given the conflict in the parties' positions, there is no reason to delay the sentencing herein, and he asks the court to set a sentencing date in this matter." Paul Manafort has been in solitary confinement in a Virginia jail since June, when he was accused of violating his probation by actively tampering with witnesses to try to get them to spin his actions in a more positive light. Paul Manafort was already facing the prospect of at least 10 years behind bars. Tonight, he faces the prospect of even more time for breaking his cooperation agreement by lying on a variety of subject matters. Mueller's team could also refile charges on counts they previously agreed to dismiss as part of the plea deal. Now, how likely is it that Mueller's prosecutors do refile charges against Trump's former campaign chair? What does this mean for Paul Manafort? What does this mean for the other Trump campaign officials who continue to cooperate with the special counsel? What does this mean for Trump? And what does it mean for the special counsel himself at a time when his investigation appears to be increasingly under threat? Joining me now, Barbara McQuade, former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan, and Daniel Goldman, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Thank you both for being with us. Barbara, let me just start with you. These cooperation agreements require much more than answering a few questions about the matter at hand. They require, in this case, required Paul Manafort to answer any question about any legal wrongdoing he's ever been involved in or known of.
Yeah, it's an all or nothing proposition. When the government is talking with someone about cooperation, they want to know everything about this case. They want to know everything about their own misconduct because they are recruiting him now to be on their team. They're going to put him on the stand, essentially vouching for his truthfulness, sponsoring his testimony, and asking a jury to believe him. And they can only do that if they are convinced that he is telling them the truth. They understand that people commit crimes, but this is the deal, and you understand that what the stakes are. When there's a breach like this, it really is a lose-lose proposition. Paul Manafort is now going to face more time than he otherwise would have, and now the government has lost a cooperator who had potential value to them.
Daniel, I mean, he could face a lot more time. This guy could never see the outside of a jail now. What would have compelled him not to cooperate? He already had to give up his property. He was already going to go to jail for some things. It was clear that the Mueller investigation had a lot of evidence on him. What do you think is behind this?
Well, there's a lot of speculation already that he's been dangled a pardon or he's afraid of some of the Russians that he may have information on. We don't have any evidence of that, which is, I think, very important to point out. And second of all, I think it fails to understand how self-interested and irrational someone like Paul Manafort is. Someone who has committed fraud in various forms for so much of his life. I prosecuted white-collar cases, and I frequently saw people like Paul Manafort who would essentially try their last heist on the prosecutors and try to very frequently protect himself from further wrongdoing. And you and Barb just discussed how you have to actually admit to additional criminal activity. It very well could just be that Paul Manafort was unwilling to admit to additional crimes, perhaps related to the campaign and to Russia, that we know were under investigation, and that ultimately Bob Mueller just had enough and said, if you're not going to be truthful, you're not getting your cooperation agreement. And he's now looking at 10 years in D.C., plus perhaps anywhere from 11 to 14 years will be the guidelines in the Eastern District of Virginia. It's unlikely they'll both run one after the other, but we're talking double digits amount of years in jail.
So, Barbara, I mean, have you had a circumstance like this where someone who you've made a deal with went and lied? And is there something we're missing here? Is there some potential upside to Manafort doing this?
No, it does happen from time to time. It's actually pretty rare. Usually, most of the time, by the time someone has sat down, entered into a guilty plea, they understand that the best they can do for themselves is to cooperate fully and truthfully so that they can get that motion to have a reduced sentence. And a good lawyer will sit down with their client and explain that to them. On rare occasion, there are defendants who will continue to lie, oftentimes minimizing their own role. It sounds like that's what happened with George Papadopoulos. And at some point, the government just tears up the plea agreement and says, we're done because we can't sponsor you. If it's, a slight lie, even that's problematic because it has to be reported to the judge and the defense so it can be used as impeachment material. But at some point, you get to the point where you feel like, I just can't work with this person. I can't trust him. You have no value to me as a cooperator, and we're done. And, as I said, it's a lose-lose. I think the government would prefer to have his cooperation, but they can only do that if they believe he is being truthful.
So, Daniel, let's go to 50,000 feet here. We've heard that Papadopoulos has signed into jail because he didn't cooperate in the way that was meaningful. We understood that Manafort's cooperation was in concert with others. We're waiting to see sentence filing from the government on Michael Flynn. Is there a ripple effect to this?
I think there's a significant effect for the government because of Paul Manafort's central position in the campaign. He was the campaign manager. He was in that June 2016 Trump Tower meeting. He was actually overseeing the convention for the party and for the campaign. And you'll recall that the party platform changed in a Russia-friendly way. It felt to many, including me, like Paul Manafort would help Bob Mueller get to the bottom of whatever happened. And this is particularly relevant for people who perhaps didn't use email, such as the president. And that if he's the campaign manager and he has all these contacts and relationships with Russia, that if someone's doesn't have a paper trail, you need a cooperating witness to know what conversations went on. And I think this is a real blow to the special counsel not to be able to get that information and use it through Paul Manafort, because now it can't be used. You need to be a witness in order to be able for the prosecutor to use the information. Even if he gave some information that was truthful, they cannot rely on him to testify to that information, so they have to find it elsewhere.
We have heard, however, today, Barbara, that Roger Stone associate Jerome Corsi, who's a strange character. This is the guy behind the birther conspiracy. He was going to conduct an interview with us at NBC about a week ago. He then didn't get out of his car and didn't do it. Now we've heard that he has turned down a plea deal from Robert Mueller. Do you make anything of this?
You know, it's hard to know exactly what's going on. What he has said publicly is that he refused to plead guilty to perjury because the purported perjury charge was based on his failure to remember something. That does not ring true to me. Perjury is charged only when you can prove the essential elements that a person testified under oath, that they then and there knew that what they were saying was false and that it was about a material fact. That is something that is important. It is not something that has slipped your memory. You can't recall. So I don't know exactly what has happened there. It seems more likely that someone has decided I can't do time. When you agree to plead guilty, you have to own your crimes, and you may face criminal exposure, including sentencing before a judge. And so often the sticking point is the person wants a promise of probation or some other sweetheart deal that the prosecution just isn't willing to promise.
All right. Thanks to both of you for your analysis tonight. Barbara McQuade is former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. Daniel Goldman, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks, Alan.
I want to give you a quick update about another legal story that we're following. Back in June, the New York Attorney General filed a lawsuit against the president and his charitable foundation, alleging a pattern of illegal behavior that spanned more than a decade. The lawsuit has ensnared not just the president, but also his children, who allegedly used the Trump Foundation to prop up Trump's presidential bid and settle business disputes. It's been an open question as to whether this case could go forward. Trump's lawyers had challenged whether a sitting president could face a civil lawsuit. Well, now consider that matter settled. Over the weekend, a New York judge ruled that a lawsuit against the president's charitable foundation can proceed. The judge ruled in no uncertain terms, quote, "I find I have jurisdiction over Mr. Trump." Watch this space. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.